Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna. Jaya Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Radhe. Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Gaur Hari Bol. Jai Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajakacarya Stotra Shatashi Srimad Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Kali Yuga Pavan Shri Harinama Sankirtan Mahayagni Ki Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Nitai Gaura Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamaśloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, we are reading from Canto 3. Can you just get the cable? Cable in my blue bag. In my blue bag near my chair at the back. The back pouch. Okay. Okay. We're reading from Canto 3, Chapter 26. Okay, this is entitled Fundamental Principles of Material Nature, verse 6. Evam parabhidyanena kartritvam prakrite puman karmasu kriyamaneshu gunairatmani manyate. Evam parabhidyanena kartritvam prakrite puman karmasu kriyamaneshu gunairatmani manyate. Evam parabhidyanena kartritvam prakrite puman karmasu kriyamaneshu gunairatmani manyate. Evam parabhidyanena kartritvam prakrite puman karmasu kriyamaneshu gunairatmani manyate. Evam parabhidyanena kartritvam prakrite puman karmasu kriyamaneshu gunairatmani manyate. Evam parabhidyanena kartritvam prakrite puman karmasu kriyamaneshu gunairatmani manyate. Mataji. Evam parabhidyanena kartritvam prakrite puman karmasu kriyamaneshu gunairatmani manyate. Evam, in this way, para, other, abhidyanena, by identification, kartritvam, the performance of activities, prakrite, of the material nature, puman, the living entity, karmasu kriyamaneshu, while the activities are being performed, gunaihi, by the three modes, atmani, to himself, manyate, he considers. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Because of his forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of material energy as his field of activities, and thus actuated, he wrongly implies the activities to himself. Purport. The forgetful living entity can be compared to a man who is under the influence of disease and has become mad, or to a man haunted by ghosts, who acts without control and yet thinks himself to be in control. Under the influence of material nature, the conditioned soul becomes absorbed in material consciousness. In this consciousness, whatever is done under the influence of material energy is accepted by the conditioned soul as self-actuated. Actually, the soul in his pure state of existence should be in Krishna consciousness. When a person is not acting in Krishna consciousness, he is understood to be acting in material consciousness. Consciousness cannot be killed, for the symptom of the living entity is consciousness. The material consciousness simply has to be purified. One becomes liberated by accepting Krishna, or the Supreme Lord, as master, and by changing the mode of consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Tassaiva heto prayateta kovido nalabhyate yad brahmatam uparyadaha tallabhyate dukkha vadanyata sukham kalena sarvatra gabhiram hasa. In 5th chapter of Canto 1, it is explained that the goal of human form of life is to look for something which is transcendental, that thing which you cannot find in the 14 planet systems, in the material universe. Not to simply go after material pleasures or anything of this world, because it is always subjected to duality and the three modes. Before I begin, I would like to seek the blessings of His Holiness Amya Vilas Swami and His Holiness Chandrasekhar Swami, so that I can speak in line with what Sri Prabhupada has presented from Prabhupada's purports and lectures, from his mood, and whatever due to my neophyte nature I may commit some mistakes, please feel free to correct me. So before we begin, of course, Sri Prabhupada in this purport is talking about material consciousness and Krishna consciousness. Of course, why? On account of forgetfulness. So if we this is the 6th verse of the 26th chapter. If you go here, yeah. See, here Lord Kapila is speaking. He is speaking to his mother Devahuti. Usually we find in Śrimad Bhāgavatam, Shruti Falashruti. Falashruti means the fruit of hearing is given at the end of the katha. But here you will find, initially Kapila begins with what you will get by hearing this narration of this knowledge, what Kapila is going to speak. What is it? First of all, he says, if you hear this chapter very carefully, any person can be released from the influence of modes of material nature. That means we can become transcendental to the three modes. Then he says, I am going to explain that knowledge unto you by which the knots of attachment to the material world are cut. So our material attachments can be cut. We can rise beyond duality and become transcendental. And then he first of all explains who is that Supreme Lord. He is one who has no beginning. He is transcendental to the three modes of material nature and beyond the existence of this material world. Why he is saying this? Because first of all, it's very important to understand who the Supreme Lord is, and that his nature is transcendental. Because a person who is free can free us. A person who is untied can remove our knots. Therefore, Kapila explains that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is one who is himself, first of all, he is transcendental. And then on he goes to explain, but that Supreme Personality of Godhead accepted the subtle material energy as he takes help of subtle material energy to create the material world, which of course expands into three modes of material nature. So you'll find the subtle material energy is very subtle, isn't it? Why? Because even as devotees we can succumb to material nature. Because the consciousness, sometimes for the sake of Krishna seva, we may be pursuing our material attachment. Sometimes it happens, isn't it? For example, if a devotee says, Prabhu, today I want to go and do book distribution. Where? In a bar. What time? At midnight. So it's a very dangerous thing for the devotee, isn't it? So therefore the material energy is very subtle because we don't know how the material energy affects us. We'll of course see some examples. So here in text 4, Kapila says that the Supreme Lord accepts the material energy, which is very subtle, but he accepts it as his pastime to, of course, go on with the creation. Now he explains how the material nature unfolds. First of all, she manifests into the 3 modes of material nature. Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. And using that, just like RGB, red, green and blue, you can get all the other colors. Using the 3 modes, all the objects in this material world are created, starting with even the forms of the living entities. So when our forms are products of the 3 modes, that means we should not get affected by the forms. We should not get illusioned by the forms. And then are illusioned by the knowledge covering feature of the illusory energy. Prakshepatmika and Avaranatmika. This is Avaranatmika, knowledge covering feature of the illusory energy. So this knowledge covering feature, what does it do? Now we come to our today's verse, that is, it creates forgetfulness for the living entity. Now in that forgetfulness, the living entity behaves in a different way. Why? Because when the knowledge is covered, that means the absolute truth is covered. So then what happens? The living entity falls down from his position of transcendental consciousness or Krishna consciousness. Then what happens? The transcendental living entity accepts the influence of material energy as his field of activities. That means now we feel, yes, this material world is my home. Home sweet home, as they say. Accepts the influence of material energy as a field of activities, and thus actuated, he wrongly applies activities to himself. That means now he thinks whatever is happening in this material world is because of me, isn't it? So this is the effect of the influence of material energy on the living entity. Now you will find just a couple of days ago, I had bought this fresh apple jam from upstate New York, which doesn't even have sugar, completely organic. But on the label it said, please, if you open it once, make sure you refrigerate, otherwise it gets spoiled, because it's no preservatives, it easily gets spoiled. So of course I took it, offered it to Krishna, and then I tasted it, but then I forgot to keep it in the fridge. Because I forgot to keep it in the fridge, just yesterday when I opened it, I saw a lot of fungus on the lid, inside of the lid and within the bottle. So I was thinking, all what was required for me to do was to keep it in the fridge, isn't it? Why? So that the jam is preserved for me to enjoy, isn't it? So you will find, in other words, you can compare this jam to the nectar of devotion, our devotion, which is to be enjoyed by Krishna. That is the jam. Our devotion is this jam, and the temperature, the suitable temperature for the jam to be preserved is spiritual consciousness. And the temperature in which the jam got ruined is the material consciousness. And the enjoyer of the jam is the Supreme Person of Godhead, Shri Krishna. So you'll understand then, similarly in this world, if we do not maintain our consciousness or on transcendental platform, then whatever we are going to offer to Krishna, it's not the best thing we can offer, isn't it? So in this, as we read through these verses till text 6, you will find one more interesting thing, that just chapter 25, anyone remembers was the topic? Chapter 25? Glories of devotional service. And after speaking about bhakti, Kapila is speaking about jnana. Where else do you find this pattern? In the Bhagavad Gita. He speaks about bhakti, then about jnana. So sometimes many students come and ask, we often hear, even Srila Prabhupada writes in his purports, that bhakti is independent of karma and jnana. Then why is it that Kapila even speaks about this chapter? Because we all like 25th chapter so much. Talks about association of devotees, talks about Krishna Katha. So many things are there. Then he could have just continued it with glories of devotional service. But still, he introduces jnana. Why? Because first of all, we need karma. As Arjuna in the Gita, he says, Arjuna asks Krishna in 3.1, my dear Krishna, what is more important? Is intelligence more important or acting more important? He asks. Then Krishna says, my dear Arjuna, actually being spirit soul, actually we are very active, Prabhupada writes. The soul is very, very active. That means the soul needs to be engaged in something purposeful. So, nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu atishtati karmakrit. Jatu tishtati akarmakrit. That means not even for a moment we can remain inactive. Therefore, if we don't feel engaged in something, we feel sleepy. Why? Because we are not feeling engaged. Because the soul is very active to serve Krishna. There is no soul which is produced inert. Inactive soul is not there. So, how do we understand? Some Mayavadis also say, but we can just go and merge with the Brahman effulgence. No, that is also not possible. Aruyyakachena parampadam tata patanti adaha. Why? Because the soul is active. How long will you meditate in the Brahman effulgence? You cannot stick over there for long. So, that soul which has merged with the Brahman effulgence has a huge risk of falling down. And when that soul comes down, they will do a lot of charitable activities, a lot of social activities, do a lot of opening schools and hospitals. Why? Because soul is active. Therefore, when karma is talked about in the bhakti literatures, karma to Krishna is talked about. Karma yoga. Yoga means to connect. So karma yoga means through action we connect. That is karma yoga. Working in Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada would say. Or action in Krishna consciousness. Similarly, what is the purpose of jnana? This jnana is not the dry jnana which is often used by the Mayavadis. Samprapte sannihite kale nahi nahi rakshati dukrin tarane bhaja govindam govindam bhaja mudhamate. One day as Shankaracharya was walking, he found one of his disciples sitting with grammar and doing sandhi vichhed, trying to break this, break that, join these two words, misinterpret the Vedas. So he said, what is the use of your grammar? Better you give up all this and bhaja govindam, worship Lord Govinda. Isn't it? So that this jnana which is talked about in the bhakti literatures is not that jnana which will put us to sleep. It is not that jnana which is very dry, devoid of rasa. But this is also bhakti jnana. That jnana which actually glorifies bhakti. Therefore, this karma, which is karma yoga, and this jnana, which is a description of the bhakti yoga itself, the process of bhakti, is very, very important for us to understand. And therefore, Kapila speaks this chapter of jnana, where he is explaining how the trio, Jiva, Prakriti and Ishwar, how they interact in this world. Why is it very important? Okay, let me ask you a question. Is the subject matter of Ishwar, Jiva and Prakriti relevant for all of us? Why? Why is it relevant? Sorry? It's part of Sambandha Gyan, yes. Okay, good. Anything else? Why do you think this is relevant? Ishvara, Prakriti and Jiva. Yeah, because we are part of it. We are constantly have to make choice between Ishvara and Prakriti, Krishna or Maya. Therefore, it's the most relevant subject matter, isn't it? So, therefore, Krishna is talking about this. Now, Lord Kapila is speaking about this jnana after speaking about bhakti. though bhakti is the topmost, is the most important of all the three, of all the yoga systems. So, so therefore, though bhakti is independent, we still need jnana and karma to help practice bhakti better. But karma and jnana in themselves will not give bhakti. Therefore, bhakti is independent. It's not that by reading, just by doing karma niyavadhikaraste, or only by studying and analyzing scriptures, one will get bhakti. No. So therefore, bhakti is independent. So when we come to this verse, see, by forgetfulness, in this way, evam, in this way means referring to the previous verse. What was mentioned in the previous verse? It was mentioned about, as Maharaj yesterday was mentioning, jnana guhaya. Jnana guhaya means that knowledge is covered over. And because the knowledge is covered over, Prabhupada writes here, forgetfulness. The transcendental living entity, on account of forgetfulness of Krishna, he accepts the influence of material energy as his fields of activities. Is it his field of activities? Not at all. Why? Because he is spirit by nature. Aham Brahmasmi. I am the Brahman. I am spirit by nature. Then why do I accept matter? Because forgetfulness of Krishna. So on account of this forgetfulness, in the last chapter, 15th verse, can you repeat after me? Chetah kalvasya bandhaya muktaye chatmano matam guneshu saktam bandhaya ratam va pumsi muktaye. So you'll find here it is said, it is said here there are actually two levels of consciousness. So the consciousness where the living entity is attracted by the three modes, that is called as material consciousness. That consciousness which is attached to Krishna is called as spiritual consciousness. Very easy. So here Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that under the influence of material nature, conditioned soul becomes absorbed in material consciousness. And one symptom Prabhupada writes is, in this consciousness, the living entity thinks, aham karta. Prakrite kriyamanani gune karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatma karta aham iti manyate. That means I am the doer. This is a symptom of improper consciousness. So to make advancement in Krishna consciousness, two things are required. First one is right conception, that Lord is my master, I am his servant. And then right consciousness, which is, actually in Shikshashtakam both are mentioned. Right conception is mentioned by Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitam mam vishame bhavambudau kripaya tava pada pankaja stitadhuli sadrisham vichintaya. That talks about right conception. That is, Lord is my master, I am his servant. And eternally I want to serve him. And then you will find right consciousness in the third verse of Shikshashtakam. Na dhanam na janam na sundarim kavitam va jagadisha kamaye mama janmani janmanishvare bhavatad bhakti mahai tuki tvai. That means I am not meant for enjoyment in this world. I am meant to serve the Supreme Lord. And how long can I serve the Supreme Lord? Birth after birth. Here Lord Chaitanya is saying, I am not even interested in going back to spiritual world. Why? Mama janmani janmani ishvare bhavatam bhakti rahaitu tvai. If it is talking about bhakti, I don't care if I am taking birth after birth in this world. But with regard to material sense enjoyment, I don't want anything to do with it. Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim. No followers. No, I'm not attracted to any beauty. I'm not attracted to any wealth of this material world. So this is the right consciousness. Right conception and right consciousness. So the problem with material consciousness, what happens when one is affected by material consciousness, that he thinks he is the doer, is because material consciousness means we are turning the spotlight from Krishna to us. We become the main actors. And we actually sometimes get a glimpse of this on a daily basis. When? During the practice of the most auspicious aspect of our process, that is chanting Hare Krishna in the morning. We turn the spotlight from Krishna to us. So daily when we are chanting Hare Krishna, we at least I notice sometimes what happens, a train of thoughts, which starts with, of course, one thought, comes up in my mind. Sometimes it is also that thought is to do with service only. But chanting is also service. When we chant Hare Krishna, who is under the spotlight? Krishna is in the spotlight. When chanting Hare Krishna, you are doing for his glorification, not that you are getting some great enjoyment out of it, at least at our stage. So Krishna is in the spotlight. But as we chant Hare Krishna, some thoughts come into our mind. Say, I'm preparing for today's lecture, so some thought is coming. So immediately my mind switches from external chanting of Hare Krishna to internal thought process. Okay, what should I speak on? Isn't it? So why that happens? Because externally when I'm chanting thinking, okay, I'm chanting Krishna's name for Krishna's pleasure. But internally what is more attractive to the conditioned mind is that I am the doer. Oh, I have to speak Bhāgavatam. So that becomes more attractive. So mind switches tracks. Switches the track from spiritual consciousness to material consciousness. So material consciousness means spotlight is on me. Spiritual consciousness means spotlight is on Krishna. So therefore now one thought leads to another thought. Leads to another thought. And by the time someone wakes you up, you find 15 minutes are gone. Isn't it? And you can say, Prabhu, I was just chanting, I was trying to prepare for the lecture today. What's wrong? That is also service. No. Even though it is service of preparing for lecture, but over there, aham karta is very prominent, which attracts the mind. Like many years ago, I was chanting Hare Krishna. This is like 3-4 years when I'm into Krishna consciousness. That time, while chanting, I immediately flipped into my thought process. Because in my thoughts, my spiritual master was there. There was association of devotees. Something like this was going on. So then later on, someone woke me up and said, Prabhu, you are sleeping. Better you walk and chant. Then I walked and chanted. But later on, I asked him, Prabhu, what is the problem if I flip into such thought process? Anyway, that is also spiritual. He didn't give me the answer, but when I was preparing today, Krishna has revealed some answer to this. Why? Because the internal thought process, aham karta is there. Even though it is spiritual setting, but aham karta is so big that I am the doer is so big. Say, my spiritual master. So, which is bigger? My or spiritual master? Which is more emphatic? My. My is more big than the spiritual master. My chanting. Prabhu, my chanting is not yet done, so I cannot do any service. Because my is very big. Isn't it? So in this you will find, when aham karta is very big, it's easy for the mind to flip. This is called as material consciousness. So therefore Lord Kapila, in one of the verses previously, he says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead accepted as a part of his Leela, he accepted the subtle material energy. Why is it subtle? You can understand. Even while chanting, we can flip into our thought process where aham karta is prominent. Isn't it? So similarly, you will find in the story of Devahuti. So Devahuti, she married Kardama. Why? Because he was a handsome hunk. Why did he marry Kardama? Because he had a lot of money? No. Because he was spiritually advanced. But after she got married, she served Kardama Muni for a long time without asking for anything for herself. Day in and day out, simply serving her husband because he was spiritually advanced, not because he was eating and sleeping. He was spiritually advanced. He was engaged in the process of devotional service. So she was continuously serving him, but then feeling compassionate. Of course, it is said she was serving him, keeping her desires aside. Also, she was also materially inclined. So Kardama felt compassion for her, and he asked, "What can I do for you?" Then she spelt out her desires. This is what I want. And that time immediately Kardama fulfilled them. Isn't it? But what happened to Devahuti? She was carried away. Carried away by these material sense enjoyment. The huge floating palace, the wealth, the opulence. She got carried away by all of it. Whereas Kardama was also enjoying with her. For her sake. Did he get carried away? No. So in material consciousness, we get carried away. And someone has to, point us and tell us, Prabhu, better you start coming back now. Whereas spiritual consciousness, we don't get carried away. Just like Kardama, he didn't get carried away. Why? How do we know this? Because then he told, after giving some enjoyment to his wife, he told Devahuti that now it is time for me to take sannyas. That means what? Just imagine, like when I was in a student center, we would practice, we would stay in a student center and practice Krishna consciousness. But we would get 2 months of vacation where I would go home. That's the time I would watch movies and everything. So when after doing sense enjoyment for 2 months, when I came back to the student center, it was hellish. Because you cannot get up early, I was still chanting Hare Krishna 16 rounds during the vacation. But sense enjoyment had watered down my Krishna consciousness. Because of which I could not really fit in again. Took me some time, I continued. But the thing is, after doing so much sense enjoyment, if you get carried away, to come back is also not that easy. But Kardama, after giving 9 daughters, immediately said, I'm ready to take sannyas. What does it mean? That means his consciousness never came down. He was transcendently placed. Whereas Devahuti, she realized when Kardama said he is going to take sannyas, then she understood. I married Kardama not for his handsomeness or not for his opulence, but just because he is spiritually advanced. But because I didn't take advantage of it, I took material advantage of him. Vanchita Maya Dridam is said, she says. I got solidly cheated by Maya. Why? Like sometimes we also have, say, great spiritual masters. So now, instead of hearing from that spiritual master, sometimes what happens, a neophyte disciple takes material advantage. What is the material advantage? Wherever he goes, he says, Prabhu, do you know who my spiritual master is? This great person, this most famous. He is famous, but you are taking advantage of his fame. Isn't it? That's called taking material advantage. Just like in the association of devotees, say we have many devotees who are spiritually advanced. You go to them and you are asking, Prabhu, can you teach me this skill? Can you teach me how to sing? Prabhu, can you teach me this? But ask him, Prabhu, do you have any instructions for me? Prabhu, can I serve you in any way? You see? So there are 2 ways. You can actually ask for service, taking spiritual advantage, or you can take material advantage and get cheated. So when she realized Kardama is going to leave, that time she said, oh, I've been solidly cheated by Maya just because I did not seek spiritual advancement from you. Now I seek it from you. And that is the time Kardama gave her a son who was non-different from the Supreme Person of Godhead, Lord Kapila. So you will find in material consciousness, when we get carried away, which is inevitable, it will take us time to come back. Krishna has given all of us free will. So when we don't use our free will properly, then we get cheated. And how often do we use free will? Very often. Free will means choice. And we are choosing moment to moment. We are choosing Krishna or Maya. Similarly, again, in chanting, we are trying to chant with focus, but it's just a matter of moment when we choose Maya, that other thought, the distraction thought. It's just a matter of moment. Then we get carried away. So now this choice is, some people make moment to moment, they are called the pure devotees. Moment after moment, they're choosing Krishna. Krishna this moment, next moment also I choose Krishna, after that also I choose Krishna. Some people choose every minute. They choose Krishna. Within that, they succumb to Maya. Some people choose Krishna every hour. Between that, they go to Maya. Some people choose Krishna every day in the morning. Throughout the day, they're in Maya. Some people choose Krishna once a week, like students who attend weekly programs. Some students miss out that also. They attend monthly youth festival. Once a month, they choose Krishna. Some people choose Krishna once a year, Janmashtami. Many people say, Prabhu, I'm very regular to your temple. Every Janmashtami I'm there. Isn't it? And some people choose once in a life. One time they meet a devotee and then. Of course, the meeting has effect. But sometimes they don't choose anymore. So in this way, choice is given by Krishna so that free will has been given to us by Krishna so that we choose Him. How often, moment after moment, we have to choose. That's how we have to choose. And if we don't choose Krishna, we will choose Maya automatically by default. Was the problem of choosing Maya or getting carried away by material consciousness that it takes time to come back? Example, King Bharat. When King Bharat chose inevitably subtle material energy, how subtle? He did not know material energy can come in the form of deer. He thought material energy means opposite sex. Whatever opulence, whatever he had given up. But he didn't give up his tendency to protect as a king. Isn't it? Now when he came to the forest, that tendency overtook and there was no one to tell, Prabhu, you're in Maya. There was no one to tell him. Isn't it? So because of which, he succumbed to Maya. And when did he come back? Next life. In Dear Bharat only he realized, I succumbed to Maya. In that life, till the point of death, he was still worrying. Still, while he was dying, he was telling the deer, oh, what will I do? How will you take care of yourself? He was lamenting like this. See how unfortunate. So when we get carried away by Maya, it takes time to come back. So therefore, we have to be very, very careful in making our choices. You will also see one other effect of material consciousness is, of course, for this also we can talk about many other examples like Yamunacharya, who himself was a devotee when he was small, at the age of 5. He was a great devotee. But he got distracted because he was awarded half the kingdom of the king. Because of which he went into conquering other kingdoms. He went into sense enjoyment, whatever that comes with the kingdom. And it was after many, many, many decades that another saintly person showing compassion to him sent his disciple to him. That disciple would make some spinach sabji daily for the king and he would send it to the kitchen. So every day he would eat this spinach sabji, and eating this spinach sabji, one day he got attached and this disciple one day didn't prepare the spinach sabji. Immediately the king called all the ministers and asked, who is this person making this delicious spinach sabji that I didn't get today? Then the minister said, actually it's not none of our cooks. It's actually another person who would come and give it for you to have. So he said, immediately find him. So they found him and he said, the king asked him, can you please make that spinach sabji again? He said, of course, why not? And then he said, how can I serve you? The king asked that saintly man. So he said, I know of a treasure which is guarded by 7 gates. Can you help me get this treasure? Why? Because I want to give it to you. And you are a king. It's your right to have it. King said, of course, why not? And the saint said, okay, just accompany me. It takes some days to travel there. So as the king was traveling along with the saint, daily he was hearing Bhāgavatam. Not Bhāgavatam, he was hearing Gita verses. And daily as he was hearing Gita verses, the memory of his study of Gita and practice of Krishna consciousness came in the forefront of his mind. And one day he started crying tears. And then he understood what he had given up. For what? He had given up something so attractive like Krishna for something so mundane like his kingdom. That is the time when he says, Yadavadi mama cheta Krishna padaravinde navanavara sadhamni udyatam rantumasit. That means he's saying, now that I've again surrendered my head to the lotus feet of Krishna, now I see that there is so much of fresher and newer rasas daily, every moment in Krishna consciousness. But now when the thought of sex or any thought of material desire comes to my mind, I curl my lips and spit at that thought, he said at this time. And finally they reached the place where the treasure was guarded by 7 gates. And what was this treasure? They went through this gate after gate. Finally, in the sanctum sanctorium, the saint told, this is the treasure of all our lives. He is none other than Lord Ranganath. In the temple, they have 7 gates. So like this, Yamunacharya also became devotee, but after, again, many decades. Why? Because he got carried away by material consciousness. So, there's one more. I have spoken all this. So you'll find, so therefore what is important for Krishna is what consciousness we make the offering, not necessarily the offering. With what consciousness are we making the offering? So if skill set is the requirement, then let me tell you, none of us are qualified. We are not as good as Gandharvas in singing. We are not as good as, in Gandharva Loka, there are many mridanga players and tabla players and singers and flutists and this and that. We are all unqualified, isn't it? But Krishna actually looks for with what consciousness you offer it. Like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he was towards his last days, as he was lying on the bed, he asked for some kirtan to go on, and a very professional singer of one of his disciples came, and he was singing with all the meter and everything. He said, send him back, because he's much more conscious about the swaras than about devotion. Then he called for another person who was not a singer and who could not even keep proper tal. He was singing. Now, because he was humbled by nature, he could not sing properly. Now his focus became devotion. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur heard him towards his last days. So, even Prahlad says the same thing. Manye dhanabjana rupa tapasyato ojas teja prabhava bala paurusha buddhi yoga naradhanaya hibavanti parasya pumso bhaktya tutosha bhagavan gajayutapaya. In my understanding, it's not the one's prowess, one's ojas shakti, one's capacity to influence others, prabhava, intelligence, buddhi, how good one looks, how learned one is. These are not the criteria to please the Supreme Person of Godhead. But what is it? Bhaktya tutosha bhagavan means that Supreme Lord got pleased by the bhakti of Gajendra. Gajendra doesn't have any of these, but still he got pleased. That means what is the criteria? Devotion. So in South India, there is one story about this saintly person called as Kanakadas. When Kanakadas, he was actually from a shepherd family, coward boy. So because he was from shepherd family, but he was accepted by his guru Vyasatirtha to be in the matha and get training, because Vyasatirtha could see that he is a pure devotee. So one day, Guru called him Vyasatirtha amongst all the other brahmanas, learned brahmanas. And he asked, Kanaka, so what do you say? Will this Bhimacharya go back to Godhead? He asked. Kanakadas said, yes, Bhimacharya, he has studied the 3 Vedas. He is very learned. He has spent so much time in the matha. He is qualified, in my opinion, to go back to Godhead. But he will not go back to Godhead. So he showed all respect and he said, but he will not go back to Godhead. Then he said, the Guru asked, what about this Sheshacharya? Do you think he can go back to Godhead? Then again Kanakadas glorified him to be the jewel of amongst all the brahmanas present there. He is all Chaturvedi, learned in 4 Vedas, practiced a lot of austerities, but he will not go back to Godhead. So one after the other, as the Guru asked, will this Brahmana go back to Godhead? Will that Brahmana go back to Godhead? To everyone, Kanakadas would glorify them and say that no, he will not go back to Godhead. So everyone thought this Kanakadas is very proud. Finally, Guru asked, will I go back to Godhead? And Kanakadas said, you are the Guru, you are carrying the parampara, you are all glorious, but even you will not go back to Godhead. Immediately there was an uproar in the matha, thinking, what is, who is this nonsense fellow saying that Guru will not go back to Godhead? Then Vyasatita silenced all of them and asked, Kanaka, will you go back home back to Godhead? He asked. That time he said, if I can go, I may go. So then people thought this fellow is such an egoistic person. He is saying none of the Brahmanas can go, none of these people who are performing austerities can go, Guru cannot go, but he himself will go back to Godhead. So they wanted to immediately kick him out from there, but Vyasatita stopped them and he applauded the response. And for other satisfaction, Vyasatita explained, what is it? What does it mean if I can go, I may go? That's what he said. If I can go, I may go. He said, what is the meaning of this? If I, the ego, can go, then I may go. If I think I'm a guru, I'm a spiritual master for so many people, I have so much following, therefore I can go, I should be able to go back to Godhead. No, you cannot go. So from the guru position, one cannot go back to Godhead. If someone thinks I have performed so many austerities and this is my qualification to go back to Godhead, no, not because of your austerities you can go back to Godhead. Someone thinks I have done so much of Ved Pat, so Chaturvedi, Trivedi, because of which I can go back to Godhead. No, this is not the reason you can go back to Godhead. If I can go, I, the ego, can go away, then I may go. That's what Kanakadas said. So therefore, what consciousness we are offering, making the offering, is much more important than with what the externals. It's just like, decorating the postcard, but there's nothing inside. What's the use? Just use a simple post, but give content inside. Isn't it? So, therefore, when Srila Prabhupada, I was hearing Srila Prabhupada's lecture recently, and I was amazed to find he was telling all of us in that lecture that if you wake up early in the morning and chant Hare Krishna, attend Mangalarti daily, attend Guru Puja daily, and so on and so forth, and throughout the day you are engaged in Krishna's service, then you will always remain on a transcendental platform. Like that he said. You will always remain on transcendental platform. That means if we actually take our morning program seriously, see this, Srila Prabhupada said he has already made it very easy for us. And when one disciple had this fear of whether he'll go back to Godhead or not, Prabhupada said once, don't worry, I have key to the back door of the spiritual world. So our qualification is if we can follow Srila Prabhupada properly. And therefore when Srila Prabhupada says, yes, you have to follow morning program, you have to be engaged in service throughout the day. So this will help you maintain transcendental consciousness. So our qualification would be if to simply follow what Srila Prabhupada said. Otherwise, we may think, no, I'm learned in this and that and that and this. Our mind can trick us because it itself is under the influence of the three modes. We just, as in chanting, the mind can flip. Now also thinking that this is Krishna Seva and making independent decision can be very harmful for us on the progressive path of devotional service. So therefore, the real success would be if we can maintain the right consciousness, that is the transcendental consciousness, then Krishna is pleased. And that's all we care about. So, there's one more, this point. I was thinking if we can actually be absorbed in this mood of how can I serve every moment. If you're absorbed in this mood, then what happens is our devotional service cannot be uninterrupted. I mean, will always be uninterrupted. It will never be interrupted. Because ahaitukya pratihata. If you are always in that mood of and absorbed of seva, don't get bewildered by other things, forms and structures and decoration, everything external. Worry about the substance. How can I serve? Then always bhakti is the Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotional service. So I'll stop there. Maybe 1 minute is there. If anyone wants to say something, yeah.
Hare Krishna. I have a question too, but maybe I'll just ask you after class. I just wanted to share this comment because you talked about Bhajagovindam. And it's just, I just want to show the importance of how fortunate we are that we have Srila Prabhupada's shelter and mercy. These are two different translations. The first is Prabhupada's translation, the other is a so-called guru. I won't mention the name. So this is from Prabhupada's purport in 423.18. He's citing Bhajagovindam. And then he says, he stressed worshipping Lord Krishna or Govinda 3 times in this verse, and especially warned his followers that they could not possibly achieve deliverance or mukti simply by word jugglery and grammatical puzzles. If one is actually serious to attain mukti, he must worship Lord Krishna. Here's the other translation. Yogarotava, Bhogarotava. Either in yoga or in bhoga. Either in discipline or in pleasure, somehow make it. It doesn't matter how, the important thing is you get there. So just like I wanted to reiterate that, so important that we're getting a proper understanding of this process. And of course, thank you for always giving us such a deeper thing to advance and progress in devotional service. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hey, wait, doesn't he, Maharaj, you want to add anything or? Yes.
I'll come up a little bit so we don't get feedback. One thing, you made it somewhat clear, but it's come up a couple of times I've noticed in the classes recently, and I wanted to just clarify that when the scriptures say that bhakti has to be free from all kinds of karma and jnana, which they do say, that is not the same thing as regular, what we call bhakti jnana. Otherwise, why are we reading Bhagavad Gita? Why are we reading Śrimad Bhāgavatam? I think sometimes devotees fail to grasp that when we talk about getting free from all traces of karma and jnana, we're not getting free from knowledge of Krishna. We're getting free from the path of speculative knowledge. That's what's meant by getting free from karma and jnana. So we don't want any trace of that, of being connected with the path of speculative knowledge. However, we want as much as we can get of bhakti jnana, the knowledge of Krishna. Though the word is jnana, there are two different concepts completely. One is a path of speculation, and the other is knowledge of Krishna. Genuine jnana, otherwise chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying, that there's nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. So we're certainly not trying to get rid of it. We're trying to get rid of only the path of speculation. I just wanted to make that clear. So that when people read, we're trying to get free from karma and jnana. It's not like, well, how much jnana should I get of Krishna? If I get too much, I'm going to miss bhakti. That's not the case. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj, for clarification. Krishna Kripa Prabhu has anything? Prabhu, you want to add anything?
He was talking about how Prabhupada stressed going to the morning program and doing practical work throughout the day. The Nava Yogendra Swami tells a story that one time he was in Mombasa and the temple was greatly in debt, and he was asking Prabhupada if there's anything he could do to help the situation. And Prabhupada said, make sure the devotees go to the morning program and the evening program and they do something practical during the day. So he did that, and he said, when he left Mombasa after a few years, all the debts were paid off and they had a new temple worth $2 or $3 million. And all they did was follow that instruction to make sure the devotees went to the morning and evening program and did something practical during the day. So even materially you come out ahead, what to speak of going back to Godhead. You have a better situation in this life just doing that.
Thank you for sharing that. Grantha Śrimad Bhāgavatam ki, Śrīla Prabhupada ki, Tai Gaur Premanand.
His Grace Arjunānanda Prabhu ki.